In today's video, we're going to discuss the Calgary Flames. Is there trouble within the organization? Will we see significant change in the overhaul if they don't get in the playoffs, which is quite likely? Plus, we have some updates on the Ottawa Senators sale. We have a small trade as well involving a prospect between the Florida Panthers and the Los Angeles Kings. We have some other prospect signings and other news from around the league. They'll be coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some trade talk we're going to talk about when it comes to Calgary Flames and lots of other news from around the leagues. Let's dive in and get started. First up, we have some prospects news and some prospect signings. So let's first start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They've signed defenseman Johnny Tyconic to a 2-year contract, but it's an AHL-only deal. So he's only signed to the Marlies, not eligible to a call-up to the Maple Leafs at the NHL level. So should they ever feel he's earned that opportunity, they'll have to sign him to an official NHL ELC. He's a former Senators draft pick, was originally going to University of North Dakota, was expected to maybe be a future pair between him and Jacob Bernard-Docker. They were both drafted the same draft class. We're going to go to school together. They had played together previously as well, but Tyconic didn't really work out well at UND, ended up transferring schools, and the Sens have opted not to sign him. He certainly has not quite worked out in his development so far, at least. So we'll see if the deal with the Marlies can get his career on track and if he can still, have an NHL future down the road. Speaking of the Senators, they did have to recall goaltender Dylan Ferguson for tonight's game against the Pittsburgh Penguins. They opted to send goaltender Kevin Mandolese back to the American Hockey League. Ferguson was acquired as well from the Marlies for future consideration, so basically nothing. Ferguson had previously made an NHL appearance with the Vegas Golden Knights. Was originally drafted, I believe it was Dallas that drafted him, but that he was traded to Vegas during their inaugural season around the time of the expansion draft. And that season, in Vegas' first year, they ran into a ton of goalie issues with injuries, and Ferguson ended up getting recalled on an emergency basis from junior at that point. Made a relief appearance, but it wasn't for very long, and that was his only previous NHL experience. So he comes in for his first NHL start tonight for Ottawa against the Penguins. Had a phenomenal performance, making 47 saves, leading the Senators to a big 2-1 victory on the road against the Pittsburgh Penguins. So we'll see if Ferguson can get things back on track. Like I said, he was a 2017 pick, so certainly a 7th rounder, a bit of a long shot, but certainly seems to have a lot of confidence right now, believing in himself. They've had him down in Belleville in the AHL, and obviously felt confident bringing him up, giving him a chance, and letting Mandolese go back and get more playing time in the AHL. So we'll see where that goes. I don't know how much more time he'll spend in Ottawa. It really boils down to the health of starter Cam Talbot, and if Talbot can come back or not. He's certainly out with an oblique injury. So we'll see. But as of tonight now, with the Florida Panthers beat the Red Wings, and with the Senators beating the Penguins, the Panthers now move up past the Penguins into the wildcard spot. Pittsburgh is now on the outside looking in. The Senators do move up in the standings as well, but they're still going to be a few points back, so they're still got a big mountain to climb to get into that wildcard spot. Obviously, they're kind of right there battling with the Sabres and the Capitals, and of course the Penguins now, but the Panthers are the team that's moved up. But the Islanders are still a little bit of a risky situation as well, and the other wildcard spot because they've played more games. So we'll have to see how the next probably week or so starts to play out. It could give us a big idea of how things might finish, but it could come right down towards the last week of the season. We'll have to wait and see where this goes. But the Sens do a very tough schedule. Like I said, they have a big mountain to climb. If they're going to have any hope to get back into that wild card spot, which they did very, very briefly hold for like a day, a couple weeks back. But anyways, otherwise, it's going to be an interesting finish in the Eastern and Western conferences for the final playoff spots. A few other prospect notes as well. The Columbus Blue Jackets have signed Hunter McCown. He's a 20-year-old centerman, undrafted, California-born in San Jose, played 3 years college hockey at the NCAA, Colorado College, and gets signed by the Jackets. There was rumor that the Blackhawks were also very much in the mix there as well. So very solid-looking, more mature prospect that could be able to jump in and have an impact with the Jackets here. The Seattle Kraken have also signed a prospect, right shot defenseman Philly Autolainen, who was a 2021 4th round pick out of Finland. So he'll get his ALC. to kick in as well. No signing official as of yet, but to get back to the Ottawa Senators for a moment, they are hoping to sign to one of their top prospects, defenseman Tyler Kleven, out of the University of North Dakota as well. Tyler Kleven is projected to likely be either second, third pair, left shot D. He's a big, strong, more physical guy, which is kind of like that missing element that they were looking for. So I know I kind of wondered how that would impact his role with the acquisition of Jacob Chikrin earlier at the NHL trade deadline. But Kleven, I think, could still have a solid role. When you have like veterans like Holden and Hamonic still in the mix there, they're likely going to try to get him mixed in for the future here. He might even be able to play NHL games right down the stretch, especially if the Sens do struggle a little bit and they know their playoff aspirations are slipping away. They might be more willing to give a few of these youngsters a few extra games down the stretch just to get a glimpse of what they might have in the future. But Kleven's not signed yet, but certainly something that they're working on and hoping to have done here in the near future. We also saw a trade today involving a prospect, and that's between the Florida Panthers and the Los Angeles Kings, with the Kings picking up the signing rights to prospect Cole Krieger out of Michigan State. He's a 22-year-old defenseman, put up 16 points in 38 games this year, which includes 10 goals. So 10 goals and 6 assists total. He was a very late pick in 2018 in the 7th round, 201st overall, but has had a pretty solid collegiate career. And obviously the Panthers do not appear, they were not confident they were going to get him signed. So obviously trading him is in their best interest. Obviously they don't get much of a late round pick, but at the same time, the LA Kings now have the signing rights, which will expire in August. So he can become a UFA at that point if he doesn't have a contract. So obviously the Kings, though, at the same time, they have a lot of prospects too. So it's to me, a little bit of a head scratcher unless they see him as being, potentially better value than some of the other D that's already in their system. So we'll see where that goes. We get some updates today as well from Elliotte Friedman on a new edition of the 32 Thoughts podcast with Jeff Merrick on the sale of the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, we knew about the fact that there's a lot of bids, rumored to be as many as 9, depending on which media outlet you look to. But as Friedman had talked about on the last podcast a few days back, there was rumored to be what they kind of referred to as like a bully bid, so to speak. So the first round of bidding, which is now complete and being reviewed, essentially is non-committal. So, you're not necessarily, committed to making a purchase. So if they come to you and say, okay, we like your bid, we want to close the sale, you're not necessarily, you can still say, yeah, we've changed our mind, we're out, and we'll move on. But the next round is going to be more firm commitment. So obviously it's expected that they could pick one bid and try to move to a close with them, or they could ask for new bids and kind of go through the process again with those smaller groups. They could go down to maybe 3 or 4 and kind of see where they need to go. But one thing that we did learn was that the high bid, Friedman believes, could be somewhere around $925 million, led by Nico Sparks, who's in the tech industry. But he believes that group has a lot of pieces to it. It's not a case of like one particular, small group or owner who has deep pockets, who would be the big majority owner with several smaller investors. The NHL has no issues with that, but they do seem to prefer that one entity own the majority of the franchise. They don't want several minority owners making up the total piece of the pie. And that seems like that might be the case. We really don't know the full structure or breakdown. But just because he might be the high bid doesn't mean for sure that he's going to be the preferred bid or necessarily do that. Obviously, they want to get as much money as possible, but at the same time, they also want the most stability. They want the one that they feel makes the most sense, that can take the franchise to the next level. And, it's going to fit with the group of owners in the NHL. And obviously, there's a little bit more piece to the pie here. And it doesn't mean that other bidders won't move up, and not every bid is going to show you their full best hand on the first try, right? So I suspect that like the Remington group with Ryan Reynolds, they might make things, higher on their bid the next time around. You've also got the groups led by like Michael Enlauer in the mix. There's rumored to be a bid in there from Jeff York, a farm boy, obviously brother of Jason York, former Senators defenseman and current media member. And there's other groups in there too. So certainly a lot of interested parties there, but it's interesting to find out who the likely high bidder was, and the fact that it might be, like I said, a bigger group of smaller pieces, so to speak. I don't know what they're necessarily going to be the successful candidates. Like I've said numerous times before, from what we're hearing, it sounds like Gary Bettman in AHL wants Ryan Reynolds involved, if at all possible, because of the marketing and things that he's proven he can do and be successful with all his connections, what he's done with the Wrexham soccer club that he's purchased. They've done phenomenal things there, and he's had a lot of success outside of his acting career. He's really shown to be a smart businessman as well. So we'll see how things go. An interesting update on that front. And in Calgary, Calgary's the kind of what we call the trade rumor section, what we want to talk about. The Flames was in serious trouble. Are things crumbling from within? And are we either going to see a significant trade again this offseason, or at the very least a change behind the bench? It seems like this team is in a serious danger of missing the playoffs where they are in the standings right now. It might not seem like a lot of points is being made up to get in, but they're running out of time. They're running out of time fast. And even making up, 4 or 5 points at this stage of the game is incredibly tough. Not only do you need to keep winning every night, the teams that you're battling against have to lose, and it's not easy. So when you have guys like Nazem Kadri, who's apparently showing a lot of frustration, and Jonathan Huberdeau, who we know, even though he didn't speak out publicly himself, it came from his agent, it sure sounded like there was a lot of frustration on his side of it a number of weeks back when Alan Walsh's agent certainly spoke out. Huberdeau and Kadri were their two big offseason acquisitions. I mean, obviously, their hand was kind of forced a little bit into making these trades. Obviously, they had to trade Matthew Kachaki, kind of forced their hand, say he was not going to sign in Calgary long-term, and that you might as well trade me. This is why I will. And Johnny Gaudreau left as a UFA, even though they were led to believe all along that he was coming back. I know there's a lot of rumors about how that all went down. We've heard through NHL insiders very recently, even Elliot Friedman talked about it on one of his podcasts not long ago, saying that the Calgary Flames management group was kind of feeling right up until the night before free agency that he was coming back. And apparently they get a very late night phone call the night before, which is why Brad Treliving called a press conference to notify, says he wanted to get it out there before Gaudreau magically signed off to another team the next day, that he found out Johnny was leaving. And there's some speculation, and it wasn't entirely Johnny's choice, that he wanted to come back and there's more family or his spouse. We don't know if any of that's true or not, so I'm not going to try to claim that it is. But at the same time, it doesn't matter why things happen. The fact is they had two over 100-point players that were the stalwarts of their franchise that left, and they brought in Huberdeau and Kadri, who are the replacements. Now, they're very different types of players. There's no doubt about that. But Huberdeau was coming off a 100-point-plus season in Florida, had been tremendously successful and productive down there. Yes, he was playing with Barkov a lot, but still, that doesn't matter. He can play with some really good players in Calgary, and you would think he'd be able to continue a similar type of production. However, when it comes to Nazem Kadri, he's also coming off a career year, 87 points, but he missed some games. He was on a 100-point pace. So they basically brought in two players that were capable of being 100-point players. And their both productions are way, way down, and they're putting up a fraction of the production they want that they're capable of. Now, look at what Kachuk and Gaudreau was doing there last year, 100-point pace, and now their leading scorer right now is Tyler Toffoli with like 60 points. That's a huge difference. They're not putting anywhere near the offense on the board like they were last year. And obviously this team seems to be extremely frustrated with Coach Daryl Sutter. I know in some of the games I've watched, there are times it looks like the team is checked out and that they're frustrated with him. I know Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast, again, here says that he's heard that Kadri has been very vocal about his frustration regarding the communication between the players and the coach. And like I said, you see the production, you see the numbers, you see how things are going, you see how he's played, and it shows. It's showing more glaringly all the time. The general manager, Brad Treliving, does not have a contract either. We don't know what his fate's going to be. I suspect that if Calgary misses the playoffs, which is the way things are trending as of today, that not long after the regular season is over, we are maybe sooner, I guess, but at the very least, within a short span of the season ending, we're likely going to find out something on the future of the general manager as well as the coach. And then that'll give us a better indication if they're more likely going to make changes in those roles and try to maybe tweak the rosters, because they committed a lot of money and a lot of term to these guys. So trading Kadri or Huberdeau would not be easy. I mean, there's even been rumblings on Mackenzie Weegar as well, who also signed a long-term deal. I think he might be a little easier to trade than the other two, but still, you just brought in these 3 players, 2 via trade, 1 via free agency, and, they call it the summer of tree living, summer of Brad, the summer of Pierre in Ottawa, and, not everything works out perfectly the way you hope, and this is kind of blowing up right now, and this looks like to me like the easier thing to do here might be to move on from Daryl Sutter. I mean, he did sign a 2-year extension last year, so he's got more term in his contract than the GM does. So I don't know that Trey Living is really in a position to move on from the coach when he's not even sure he's coming back yet. Now, if he gets a contract extension and he stays, I wonder what road he's going to take. He proved last summer that he's not afraid to make big swings and make big deals. And, with one of these guys with a long-term contract, end up in another, major blockbuster deal like we saw last year involving Matthew Tkachuk. It really makes you wonder, because they don't have the right mix there. I think that pretty much, to me, is clear. They're not getting consistent goaltending out of Jacob Markstrom. They have a lot of good-looking defensemen, but they're not playing up to their capabilities, and this forward group is not producing the offense anywhere near the level that they should be. I mean, take a look at what they've done before and what these players are doing now, and it's just not there. It's just not there at all. I mean, you could trade, other players besides the ones that are long-term. Maybe you move a Lindholm. I know there was some talk around him. Maybe, not that you really want to. I think you'd rather have that 40-goal centerman that you had last year, but right now that's not happening. And why is that? Not everybody clicks together. It's just that simple. Some players can be great players on their own, and paired with the right player, they can be stars. And with other guys, it's just not going to work. We've seen it time and time again. And this could be one of those classic cases. So could we see significant deals involving these big acquisitions, Toronto Flames and Huberdeau or Kadri? Or are we more likely to see changes either at the GM job and the coaching job with Daryl Sutter? Do you think that's more likely? Let me know down in your comments. Down below, we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, first make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.